Avinish, you can open the. Good evening. I'm Dr. Geeta Kumar, and a very warm welcome to you all on behalf of National HRD Network. Let me quickly share the NHRD and Mind Matters movement. We started Mind Matters in response to the growing mental health challenges during COVID in 2020, with the aim to help individuals and organizations to start prioritizing mental well-being at the workplace. And in the course of these 2.5 years, we've initiated many conversations, workshops, created toolkits through our many series over the course. And this current series, which is titled Humanizing Shame, Silence, and Seclusion, revolves around taboo topics. Our current topic today is extremely relevant, and it is the current global reality, which is layoff, and we are going to be exploring its mental health impacts. Before we begin, what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce, we have a great panel, and I'll allow our panelists, moderator for today to introduce the panelists. Ankita Podar. Ankita is joining us from Dublin. So good afternoon to you, Ankita. She's an HR professional, and she's identified as one of the emerging young HR leaders in India by People Matters, and one of the top 50 HR business partners. And this basically gives her an opportunity to work with business leaders across the globe. Can we get everybody on mute, please? Thank you so much. And with not much, very interestingly, Ankita, along with one of our co-panelists, Rajita, are hosting a podcast called HR Bandit. And she's also an avid blogger. And she writes on interesting social, psychological, and HR fields. So over to you, Ankita, to take our very, very important conversation forward.
Thanks, Geeta. I'm really excited to be here today. You are right. It is a topic that is being discussed all around the world at this point of time. So we have a packed schedule, so I'm going to jump straight into introducing our panel members. But please continue the conversation on the chat box. Like, we want to keep this interactive. So speak to each other. If you have any questions, pop them on there. We will reserve the last 15 minutes of the session today to take questions from you. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our first guest, first panelist for today. So Dr. Vandita Dubey, she is the author of Parenting in the Age of Sexposure, Raising the Precocious Generation, which was published by Rupa in 2016. Dr. Dubey earned her doctoral degree in clinical psychology from Illinois School of Professional Psychology in 2006 and obtained her psychologist's license in 2007. Her research focused on resilience. Dr. Dubey now chooses to live in the Himalayas, where she has co-founded the Himalayan Writing Retreat. She is also the expert psychologist featured on the popular YouTube channel, Zen Brain. She's conducted mental health sessions for many companies and has designed the Himalayan Happiness Project, which she conducts twice a year. In this program, people travel to the Himalayas and spend 5 days connecting with themselves and process various thoughts, emotions, and experiences. Through scientific psychology-based exercises, connecting with nature, and meditation mindfulness exercises, they rediscover their inner strength, creativity, and wisdom that they can continue to use in life with greater calm, joy, and purpose. Vandita, welcome to the panel. I'm really glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Ankita.
And the retreat sounds really exciting. I might I felt so nice just reading it out, but yes, hopefully a few of people here might take it up. I'm going to
Sure.
move on
Okay.
to introducing our second panelist. So Chetan has been laid off multiple times. He'll tell us exactly today how many times. And he speaks openly about his experience and the related emotions. His widely viewed TEDx talk is also on the same topic. He's a Penguin published author. He quit the corporate world and moved to a village in the Himalayas after a 20-year corporate career. Chetan wrote about this move from city to village in uncity.blog that won the Indie Blogger Award for Humor. He co-founded the Himalayan Writing Retreat that helps people write their books and stories. Many illustrious teachers teach at this retreat. He's also co-founded another Himalayan social enterprise, Old Hill Cheese. Chetan often writes columns for Mint and HT Brunch, amongst others. He also conducts custom workshops on writing for organizations. Dr. Dubey and Chetan work together and host digital detox workshops as well. Chetan, welcome to the panel.
Thank you for having me.
And our last panelist, but not the least, and I'm a little biased here because she might be my favorite panelist of the day. Rajata is the Chief People Officer at Kendrill India. She's a seasoned HR leader, experienced in leading large-scale transformation with business outcomes. Prior to this appointment, she led the HR organization at Broadridge Financial Solutions India, where she played an integral part of the company's growth story. She is the youngest convener of the CII HRIR panel for the state. She also serves on the committee of NASSCOM Regional Council and NASSCOM HR DNI Council. Outside of the workplace, she's a car racing champion, a classical trained Bharatnatyam dancer, and certified counselor for the underprivileged. She meditates daily, enjoys doodling, and likes to continually read up on recently published research. So there are all our panelists for today. Rajata, a big welcome to you on as our third person.
Thank you. And I look forward to speaking with Vandita and Chetan.
And me?
How can I even speak without your permission? You can just go mute, right?
Anyway, we have a great range of experts on a variety of topics today. And Rajata, I know we have you for a limited period with us today. So I am going to jump straight in with my first question for you. Now, I'm going to look at you for help to understand and set the session up. Layoffs have been a big topic of discussion for the last 4 months now. It started I first heard of it in November, and it doesn't look like it's ending anytime soon. Because you are our corporate person and representative on our panel today, can you help us understand, why do organizations do this? Is this the first and last time? And in your opinion, how do you think organizations are doing this? Are they doing it well? Is there areas of improvement? Just share your opinions on it all.
Okay, so let me start off by giving a disclaimer. These views are mine only and not of any organization that I have been affiliated with. So with that, I think it's a very typical way, right? When you start this conversation, the meetings that I've attended, they say, the minute you type layoffs on Google, within 44 seconds, you get so many. And the latest one that figures at the moment is 6 hours back, where McDonald's, temporarily shut its office and prepares for layoffs, right? That's the latest one that shows up. To your point, is layoff a new phenomenon? My answer is no. Layoffs have been in existence. It's like life, and bad analogy, but like life and death, or if you were to view it as we grow up in life, when you're a baby, you have one phase. When you're a teenager, you have another phase, then you have a phase that you're married, and then you have another phase where you're kind of retiring. You want to seek meaning, blah, 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 blah. That's a very typical way of, looking at things. And if you ask me, layoffs are no different. What is making layoffs different now is the exposure, more in terms of media. It is about the accessibility of communication. It is about the right to communication, the want for people, to have a transparent organization, and the want to be treated with respect and empathy. I think, today, if I say all of this, it would come in. Obviously, you can come back and say, Rajita, everybody's talking of purpose-driven organizations and trust and all that stuff. Then how do layoffs figure in it, right? My straight answer to that is I don't know. I'm still trying to figure it out myself, right? But if we were to just go back to basics, or building the foundation of what really needs to happen, is that it is never easy, when we talk of layoffs, and many a times people believe that people at the bottommost need to go, or people who are non-performing need to go, or it's LIFO, right? Last in, first out. You came in first. I love my people who've been with me for 20 years. I won't let them go. So you have, these are very cliched norms of how certain organizations operate out of. And being in HR at a time like this is not easy, right? Because everybody is looking at you you're like practically under the microscope and microscope. It's worse than the MRI, right? Because a lot of exposed things that would possibly come out. So let me tell you what people need to do when you're essentially doing a connect. So I'm trying to solve for when layoffs happen. How can you do it in a nice way? But before I do that, you said layoffs are going to be here. My answer is yes, layoffs are going to be here. As long as we are living, we are going to have this cycle, and it's an S-curve cycle. Any organization that grows, there are 4 voices that impact an organization, or for an organization to be a totally aligned organization. Okay, one is voice of the industry, one is voice of the customer, the other is voice of the employee or associates, as I want to call it, and third is voice of technology or delivery. And the unison of all of this will give you a totally aligned organization, possibly holonic, where everybody wants to get to.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Satish. But that's where we are at. And so if I come back and tell you what do organization need to do, is nobody can guarantee life. Life is unpredictable. I think just on the group also I said, life is unpredictable. You don't know what's going to come next. So let's be ready for whatever comes. I think handling change is very important. Okay, so for all of us to understand, empathize change is key. To everybody use buzzwords like empathy, and like I said, these are my views only. It's funny, right? Imagine I'm with my nephew. He's a 3.5-year-old, and I'm like a 40 something. Can I even put my feet in his shoes, like literally, and understand what how he feels when he walks? No. So what's with the empathy jargon? Right? So till the time I don't understand myself, I don't understand what I'm doing, I'm not going to be able to be convincing enough, for somebody to understand the actions that I'm taking from an organization standpoint. So I think that's where I want to deviate a bit and say, let's bring in compassion. Let it be a two-way street on that front. So what we need to do is, be committed that this is top driven. Many a times when you get into layoffs, people say it's an HR job. The managers don't want to own it. Though they will be the ones who will decide the list, they will come and say HR needs to go figure and go clean. Okay, so I think first accountability needs to come in from the top. Second, what needs to happen is the attitude of learning. Having difficult conversations is not easy. Not everybody is a born coach. In my head, mothers are the only ones who do this beautifully, or for that matter, grandmothers or grandparents. Beautifully, they weave the whole thing, and they're not even certified, by the way. It just comes naturally. It's instinctive to them. So how do we as leaders get to that? It's very important to be clear in actions. I think it's high time we cut the fluff and the bluff. Let's talk straight. People today appreciate that regardless of age. Some of those conversations are very critical. There is a possibility that some people are in their late 50s who would possibly be, on the verge of retiring. And then they're like, hey, you're on the list because you're anyways retiring in 2 years. We're giving you 2 years in advance. But maybe the person doesn't want the advance, right? How do you handle those conversations? So being very straight, because, people are essentially watching you. You need to understand that. And then what you also need to do is you need to understand that your problem is not their problem. Okay. The people who build the foundation of the business have plenty of things that they worry about. And many a times they forget that talent is the most important thing that you need to worry about before starting building the blocks of the thing. And just cutting out headcount to show that you're profitable, in my opinion, is the lousiest thing to do. So those are my few cents. I don't know if I answered your question, but just my views on layoffs.
No, I loved it. And, I say this often to most people I speak to. There's a lot to unpack in what you said, but I could not have asked for a better launch into the conversation, because you told us layoffs are normal, even though for many of us, we've not seen it at such large scale for a long time now, because the industry was booming in most sectors. I love the fact that you were very honest about your views on empathy and how we replace it with compassion, and also moving the lens from individuals, because often when we read the news, or heaven forbid, we are impacted by layoffs, we think of it from our perspective. We forget about, looking at HRs as people, or even knowing that the organization wouldn't have taken that decision if there were other alternates, though I'm sure many organizations could have gone away with doing differently. But I am going to turn the lens on someone who has been through this experience, because you've brought in the organizational perspective. Chetan, you've been laid off, and I know the bio said multiple times. I'm gonna let you share just how many times. But my question to you is, can you talk us through the day that you were laid off, right? Like when you first heard the news, your feelings, tell us the sequence of, take us through that day, right? The actions that happened, your emotions. Just tell me what happened.
Sure. So, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I used to be running a small startup. This was in the education space, and things were not going well. It was quite obvious to me. And then we had a conversation, and it was very interesting because we decided that we would lay off more than half the team that we had. And I had a sense that after I had done all the dirty work, the two co-founders would ask me also to go. But I went ahead and did it anyway, because that was kind of the writing on the wall. And I did. And after I did, I really cleaned out the team, and it was down to less than half of what we started with. We sat down with the co-founders, and the sad thing was that they didn't even honor the notice period. In my case, so for all the other people, we said that we would honor the notice period, but in my case, they said they wouldn't even honor the notice period, and instead of 3 months, it was a 1 month notice that I got. So, and I was in a rut at that time. I was in the corporate treadmill, right? So I had a salary coming in, I had an EMI going out, I had kids going to school, I had high cost, a lifestyle, and we were not sitting on a large cushion of it. So it was actually a moment of panic for me, more than anything else. It was, in my head, the moment I heard it, I was doing the maths saying, okay, how is this going to work? How long will it take me to find another job? What is it going to mean for me personally, for my family? And the second thing was then, okay, professionally, what does it mean? And I mean, I have great credentials, even if I say so myself. I've done a lot of good things, and I've had great stints also in the corporate world. So it's not like I hate the corporate world. But it was panic. And the second emotion that comes with it is some degree of shame and some degree of guilt, because I felt like I had failed. I felt like somehow it was my fault, right? Now, when I look at it in hindsight, after 4 or 5 years of struggling, the company shut down. And the company shut down because the business model was broken, right? But what we do is we land up first pointing the finger to ourselves, saying, "Meri galti," right? And I think that's a fundamental mistake, which I did not make the second time around, but we'll talk about the second time later. But I think that's an instinct, right? Because it's survival. Survival means where will the money come from? How will I support my family, and how will I live my life? And how will I get back into the workforce, right? And for that, then so your instant thing is you go into your LinkedIn profile, you clean it up, and you reach out to everybody to try and find something that's going. But it's not it's a very, very difficult time. And for most people, and possibly more for men, I don't want to stereotype, but possibly more for men, we have a hard time talking about it. We have a hard time sharing it. So it's a really brutal experience, psychologically, mentally, and we feel a lot of things which are very negative on that particular.
Chetan, how long did it take you to go from the panic and the anxiety to action, right? Like you talked about updating your LinkedIn profile and everything. Like, I'm sure it wasn't like, oh, I've got the news of I'm being laid off, and an hour later you're back on LinkedIn updating it, right? It is a process. Could you help our listeners understand, like how much is all right to like just sit back with the grief and shock, and then how quickly should they jump into action?
So it helps if you're married to a psychologist. As you all have probably guessed, Vandita and I are, she's not better now. So, but I think talking about it and talking about it openly with people that care for you is definitely a very, very good first step. I don't think one can afford to wallow in today's world. I mean, if you have your whole lifestyle attached to one particular source of income, you can't afford it. You basically have to get back up and you have to start running again. You have to figure out what else to do and where to go and how to manage things. So, I don't think one should take time, but I don't, and my own behavior was completely different the second time. So I think there was a learning there, but I don't think one should, take all the blame, take all the guilt, try and bottle it up and, just kind of deal with it in a strong silent type thing. That's just the wrong way to go about it.
I absolutely agree.
But you need to bounce back very quickly. Yeah. To answer your question.
Thank you, Chetan. Because it's useful, right? For me, like, I would sometimes go into the assumption that it's all right to, sit back take a couple of days and then think about it. But I think everyone needs to evaluate their personal situation and then bounce back into the action accordingly. And I loved that you got Vandita into the conversation, because I'm playing round robin here. Vandita, I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on, say, because you did your research on resilience, right? How do you think if someone's been impacted, they move forward?
Okay. So there's many things that go into resilience, but can you hear me fine?
Yeah? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So, just kind of going back to what Chetan was also talking about, that, one of the strong emotions that people experience in a situation like this is often shame, yes. Embarrassment. And and those are emotions that kind of lead you to withdraw. You want to not meet people. You don't want to be out there. You don't want to have to explain. You don't want to, all of that stuff. And I think it's very important to understand that very emotion, because it's a very powerful emotion, and to understand that it exists for a reason, right? As social animals, and that's what we are as human beings, we have existed because we have been part of tribes, part of groups, yes. of people, right? So shame actually has a survival value to it as an emotion, right? And that's not something that we can control. It's part of our survival mechanism. None of the emotions we can control. We feel a whole range of emotions, and we cannot prevent ourselves from feeling even a single one of them, right? But then the most thing is, so you feel an emotion, then what do you do with it, right? And that is the point when it's very important to when you feel that emotion, to say, okay, where is it coming from? Now, what makes shame really important and difficult to deal with is that shame is given, shape and size by the culture that we belong to. What is looked at as shameful versus what is not looked at as shameful, right? By the society and culture that we're a part of. And also our own experiences, within our families growing up. So it's a lot of conditioning that shapes how you experience different kinds of situations, and what you make of it, right? So when it comes to how, and resilience is about, it's about resilience in short means bouncing back, right? Going through difficult circumstances, and being able to kind of pull oneself up, or kind of being able to get back to whatever one needs to do and move on with life, right? And one of the important things when we talk about resilience is, of course, the presence of supportive folks around oneself, and they could be whoever and however, whatever that shape, size, that relationship looks like, whoever it might be. So some degree of support, and also the inner resilience, your ability to deal with your own thoughts and emotions, and not get completely drowned in whatever emotion you're feeling. And that's where it'd be great if there are supportive people around, whether it's colleagues and the organizations, or it is family members, or it is friends, or whoever else, whatever your support system is. But the thing that you and that is something also that, of course, we work over we work on over time, right? You invest in relationships, and those relationships are there for you wherever those relationships are. But the other thing is in terms of just dealing with one's own emotions. So like I said, shame and embarrassment, that's a big one. Of course, along with worry about more practical kind of logistical kind of things, and very, very practical things, right? So and now, of course, the worry exists because worry is an emotion that can either help you do things, right? Or it can paralyze you, right? So whether it's anxiety and worry that is so overwhelming that it paralyzes you, or it is shame that is so intense that it paralyzes you, neither emotion helps, right? So you have to, in that moment, deal with these emotions. And one of the ways to deal with these emotions is really to say, okay, to first even identify whatever you're feeling. What are the range of emotions that you're feeling? And there is no right or wrong in emotions. You feel what you feel, like I said, and nobody can prevent themselves from feeling any emotion. You will feel the whole range. But you feel whatever emotion, and then you pause, and then you ask yourself, okay, where is it coming from? What is this about? Do I really need to be ashamed about this? And then you try and take yourself out of that situation, try and get a perspective and say, okay, if this happened to my best friend, what would I say to him or her? I would say, it's okay. It happens. It happens to many, many people. And of course, if you start counting people, or, now, I guess the good thing about, having the internet and everything is people do talk about their experience, right? So it's not hidden anymore. So it happens, right? And then it's important to say, okay, fine, it happens to a lot of people. It's not about me personally. It's not a failing on my part. It's not, it's nothing's wrong with me, or, I'm not to blame, but just kind of doing that for oneself, talking to oneself and saying it's okay. So in a sense, you have to kind of talk to yourself as if you were your best friend, and say it's all right. It happens to a lot of people. It's okay. You don't have to, especially with shame and things, embarrassment, you don't have to hide because of it. And then, of course, the worry is also telling you something, which is that, okay, you need to do something about things now, right? And then it's then about, whatever one can do, right? So whether it's that you have to pull out your resume again and, or get back to your network and start speaking with people, or whatever things that you need to do, which, like, I'm sure you guys know that better than me, but getting back into the game, so to speak. So that's kind of, that's where the resilience comes up. That's where resilience gets expressed.
Perfect. Thank you. I don't know, Rajat, if you have time for one last question, but one that I talked about shame, right? And just how the society is built today, that you do feel like shame is one of the bigger emotions that you feel when you're being laid off. And like Chetan said, you blame yourself. I want to get your point of view on saying that because this has been in the news and we're seeing numbers, do you think it helps normalize layoffs? Like, are we moving to a point where we started accepting that this is just how organizations work, and we will get to that stage where it's all right to say you got laid off?
So normalization is a very interesting concept, right? And are we, are we okay, and do we think it's normal behavior? Let me say this, and this is nothing to do with India. Okay, I will talk about human beings in general. across geographies because the feelings are the same. So if you look at it from a feeling standpoint, it is still not acceptable, right? And it gets very tough to normalize that and come to accept it in society that I was laid off. And again, some people may hate it, but I want to give the analogy of marriage. Okay, what happens when people take up jobs, especially when they're freshers, or if they're switching jobs and they stay in a company for 5 years plus? The joke in corporate lingo is, oh, you're married to the company, right? I worked for one company for 22 plus years. Nobody even thought I will ever move out of the company. But that's a different story. And I was not laid off, but I decided to move out because I said, enough is enough. I need to do something on my own. So when you look at it from that standpoint, is that it is still not okay, right? And marriages, we still say it's a taboo. If you're married once, it didn't work out, you decided to get somewhere else. And layoffs is a form of ugly divorce. At times it can be pleasant, at times it's not. I don't think that it is fair to generalize everything and say that I'm going to normalize and the shame is going to be there, not there, etc., etc. I think what's important is that we need to understand that at the end of the day, every organization, though it builds its own character, is working for profitability. So there's a question from AZ, that keeps coming in. And I don't know whether it's him or her or other. I said that we will, touch base offline. But the point I'm trying to make here is that you don't know. How is the organization going to react to change? What you have in control is yourself, which is why what Vandita and Chetan are now doing about self-awareness becomes extremely, extremely important. And that's when we need to drive home the point that, as long as we know that we're here for a short stint, we know that our meaning and purpose of life is beyond work. The problem is, we are slaves. The minute we join, we want to do the meetings, we want to do everything, and we behave like we're Atlas. Imagine if you shrug, then what happens? Big deal, nothing's going to happen. So that's the reason why people need to shift and understand life is important. When life events like this happen, your family is the only thing that's there. And I know I'm going to be very unpopular by making that statement, but I believe you me, people will still be engaged if you say it, is that you need to treat work as work. Health comes important, prioritize yourself. And if you do it that way, it doesn't matter who says what about you from a layoff standpoint. And the organization, tomorrow, God forbid, something happens to me, will backfill my position immediately. My family is not going to be able to fill the void. So learn how to get that whole perspective together and then start moving in things. So those are my 2 cents. And with that, I would like to say thank you. And I'm sorry, but I really need to leave. I'm missing the conversation, but I will see the recording. So have a great one.
Thank you so much for being here.
Bye.
Chetan and Vandita, it's just the 3 of us now. So I am going to ask you each a question, and then we're going to open it up to the audience. But we did talk about normalization. We talked about experiences of being laid off. And Chetan, you quit. I think after the second time, you took a completely different career choice, right? Can you talk about how layoffs are an opportunity for us to introspect and try and figure if this is the career we want, or is do something else? Chetan, I think you're on mute.
Yeah. Okay. So the question I was asking is, why do we land up in our jobs?
Yeah.
And I don't know how many of us land up in our jobs because we really choose that work. Okay. A lot of us land up in our jobs because of social conditioning, because of pressure, because of family, because of requirements of earning a living, because of definitions of success, right? And we never have the opportunity to sit back and say, okay, like Rajita was saying, you're a human being, you have 20 other priorities, you have a lot of other things that you're capable of, and the job is one box, right? It's not the only box, and it's not your whole life, and you shouldn't make it your whole life, because then if you lose it, you lose everything. So the important thing is to be able to step back and ask yourself, okay, who am I, and what do I really want? Okay, those are difficult questions. when you start asking those questions, even if you don't get laid off, there is a good chance you'll quit. So ask them very carefully. But those are important questions. And so, I had a slightly crazy life experience in between, after which I was really disaffected with the corporate world. I talked about it in my TEDx talk. But when I had the layoff the second time around, I didn't go back into it. And I actually, because Vandita was ahead of me in the line, and she really hated me. And we were both lovers of the mountains. We both dreamt of living in the mountains. So we both packed our bags, we took our kids, and we moved to a small village in the mountains. And there was no plan. That was a scary bit. There was no plan. There was no job. There was no prospect. Even Vandita, who runs a thriving private practice as a counselor, this is all pre-COVID. I'm talking about 2015. Okay, her practice shrank to about a third of what it was. But there was about a year and a half when I had a vacuum. Okay? And the thing is that first you have to take all the stuff out of your life to be able to fill it in with something. And when I had that vacuum, I had a great opportunity to actually start thinking about what would I really want. Okay. The good thing about moving to the village was that our cost of living, which I talked about earlier, I had a house in the city. We sold it. And so our cost of living went down to about 1/6 of what it used to be in the city. We were in a small rented 2-bedroom flat in a house in a village. Our kids went to a local village school where the school fees was like 150 rupees. And it was a beautiful school. I'm not denigrating it. It's a beautiful, beautiful school. We still support it. But it gave me a vacation from pressure. It gave me time off from the treadmill. So I could actually stand aside and I could actually ask myself, okay, what do you want to do? What do you want to make out of all of this? And what are your priorities? If you don't have, a job predefined, there is no job description. And I said, I have this opportunity now. I want to write my own job description. It comes with risk. Obviously, it comes with risk. So we said, I want to make my own job description. What would I like it to be? And in that, I started looking at the things that I like to do instead of, an organization having a set of priorities. And that included writing. I was already published with Penguin when this happened. I love teaching, and I love the Himalayas, and I love entrepreneurship. So I kind of put all of that together, and I said, let's try and, I experimented. Before that, also experimented with a lot of other stuff. I tried to teach at a B school. It was a little too boring. I tried to design bike tours, but there wasn't really too much going on there. So I came up with something called the Himalayan Writing Retreat. And we announced a workshop and some 6-7 people showed up and I designed a 2-day curriculum and we taught it. That was in August of 2016, October of 2016. And that was an idea which really took a nice shape form. Vandita supported it a lot. She's come up with her own workshop now, the Himalayan Happiness Program that we talked about. And we now have 3-4 Sahitya Academy Award winning writers teaching for us. We have, Commonwealth Award winning short story writers teaching for us. But it's a field that I'm passionate about. I love to write, and I would love to engage. Yesterday, I interviewed a gentleman called Jerry Pinto, if you've heard of him, for an hour because of a charitable event that we do. So it gave me the opportunity to really rethink life and to recreate or rebuild my life in a mold that I would be happy with. So now I work a lot. I probably work as much as I did earlier. I don't earn as much as I did earlier, and I don't care. Right? I'm very happy with as much money as I make because I was in the C-suite when I moved out. But I love what I do. And I love my new life, and I have no regrets about not having gone back into the workforce and looked for new things. So, was I lucky? Absolutely. Is there a good chance that I could have tried this? It would have failed spectacularly, and I would have come back to the city and looked for a job after 4 years. Definitely. That's a risk. So it's not. It sounds very rosy now, but and was it easy? It was not. It was very difficult because for 20 years, my identity was my title, my business card, and then suddenly I didn't have a business card. So that's a crisis. That's a crisis for any professional saying, who am I? Because I'm, the vice president of nothing.
Yeah.
So that was the whole thing. But that's my journey, and our journey, and it's been really rewarding. It's had its ups and downs, and it's not all been smooth. But now, when we're looking at the way things are, I'm glad that they worked out.
Thank you for sharing that experience. And I hope it inspires many of our listeners to also re-inspect their life, see if they need to do something different. But Vandita, I have one last question for you before we open to the audience. We've been talking about, like, throughout the conversation, about people who have been impacted. But I think it's important to acknowledge there are a lot of people who've not been impacted who also are feeling anxious, because the concept of job security is now up in the air. Our relationship to work's changing. Like, there are a lot of things happening out there. How do those who've not been impacted, like, how do they take care of themselves? How do they treat their colleagues? Because I think everyone needs to take care of themselves in this correct environment. So do you have any tips for the rest, for like the other section?
Sure. So I think it's important to kind of, again, some things go back to us as human beings and just the nature of human beings, right? So as human beings, we don't like change. Right?
Mm-hmm.
But then that's the only constant in life. The only constant is change, right? And whether it's in a work situation or it's in a, outside of work situation, change always happens. And I think, one is, of course, it's not to deny what you're feeling. So if you're feeling something, of course, it's coming from somewhere, right? And the thing is to pause and say, okay, where is this coming from? If I'm feeling anxious because there are layoffs in my organization, or I don't, or so let's first talk about that. Let's talk about the anxiety that's generated by all this change that's happening, right?
Yes.
And so one is, of course, to just pause and acknowledge and give voice to those feelings and say, okay, what am I feeling? I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling worried. I'm feeling sad. I had to see a colleague go, or whatever it is. I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling angry. This is unfair. So there'll be lots of different emotions that will come up, and I think it's important to pause and again, like I said, identify what those emotions are, and then look at where they're coming from, right? And so again, we view a lot of things based on it's kind of an internal framework, right? Of expectations that we have, expectations of ourselves, expectations of other people, expectations of life, right? So things like I would say, okay, this is unfair. This shouldn't be happening, right? Why is this happening? It's important to kind of pause with that and say, okay, but who said this wouldn't happen, right? Who says bad things won't happen in life? Good things happen, bad things also happen, right? So there really, so we may build certain shoulds and shouldn'ts in ourselves, but then the fact is there are no shoulds and shouldn'ts out there. Everything happens, things happen, right? So I think one is just figuring out where one's emotions are coming from. Where is this anger coming from? Or where is this feeling of sadness coming from? Or where is the worry coming from? What is it saying to you? What is it telling you, right? And then sorting through those emotions, really sorting through those emotions for oneself and figuring out, what is it? So it may be that you're taking on somebody else's anxiety. Somebody else close to you is very anxious. You're watching people being anxious, and you kind of kind of getting to you, and therefore you're feeling anxious. So you have to pause and say, okay, this isn't really me. This doesn't belong to me. I can see that somebody is very anxious, but that's not for me to feel right now for whatever reasons, right? Or your situation might be very different from somebody else's situation, right? So a layoff would mean different things to different people in terms of on a very practical level as well, right? So maybe they do need to worry. Somebody else needs to worry a lot about something. Maybe you don't need to. So you need to figure out, is that emotion for you, or is it, you're just kind of getting into the flow with things? Because as human beings, we do, in a certain environment, it's our nervous system is also tuned to other human beings, right? So we do take on anxiety. We do
Absolutely,
take stress
yes.
in a stressful environment. So it's just being very mindful of and aware of what one is feeling and where things are coming from and how relevant is it for you. And even if you are feeling anxious because maybe there is uncertainty, right? Then it's really thinking about, okay, can you chalk out a plan B for yourself? You know, what can you do? So if your worst fear comes true, how will you deal with it? And all of us deal with everything. I mean, people have dealt with much worse things in life, right? So we can all deal with things, and we can all, in fact, find a better place. But it's about figuring out again what your backup plans are. Maybe it's about making those plans, figuring out what that is going to be. If it's anger, figuring out what that anger really is about, who is it towards. Sometimes if you really delve within, it may be that you're feeling angry at yourself. You feel, okay, I put myself in this situation. Why did I decide this, right? So just sorting through all of those emotions and figuring out what is it, what are they telling you, and how much sense does it make versus it doesn't make, and what can you change?
Thank you. Yeah, we could go on this topic for a very long time, and I agree with you about so many things, about taking on the anxiety of the environment, and then obviously we get angry and we find someone else to project it on. But you rightly said we could be just pissed at ourselves, like, why did I do this to myself? But I am going to open the floor up to the audience. So if you have a question, please pop it into the chat box. We'll take it. And if I've missed a question that's been asked before, I'm hoping Geeta can help me find them. Any questions? The chat box has been really busy. It's been, I'm loving that. Okay, so we have AZ asking us a question. Are we talking enough about the link between layoffs, insecurity to the rise of mental illness amongst working professionals? Would any of you like to take that?
I don't. That's a question that can't be answered unless one has numbers, right? So unless we have data to go with, we can't say whether mental health issues are rising or not rising. There is more awareness, yes. There is more acknowledgement. So that's there. But are there issues? Yes, of course there are issues. I mean, has work stress not existed before? Of course it's existed before. Have people been laid off? Of course they've been laid off. Have people struggled with all? Yes, they have. They may not have openly talked about it or acknowledged how anxious they're feeling, or how somebody's feeling depressed or going into depression, or whatever it is, right? Whatever impact it's having. I don't think we've had the space earlier and even the awareness to talk about those things. So I can't really, it wouldn't be fair to really answer. I mean, I don't know how to answer that question, but yes, of course, I mean, stresses do affect us. This is a stressful situation and it's going to impact.
Thank you. I am going to, again, on a related note, what can an organization do to support employees more during this time? Do you have recommendations? I can take some away.
Chetan, would you like to? Okay. See, I think I don't know. I mean, because I'm not from an organizational background, it'd be hard for me to really answer that question. But what I do know is that sometimes I think it's going to be hard anyhow. But I think the way it's done is sometimes what makes it really more difficult. I know it's done for practical reasons, but I think almost feels like, you're part of a family and that's what you're supposed to believe. And then suddenly the door is slammed shut on you, without any notice, because a lot of times layoffs happen like that. You pack your stuff and you're out, or you're not even being let into an office, right? And suddenly you're out in the cold. So I think that's sometimes a little traumatic, maybe for practical reasons that organizations do that. Ideally, in an ideal world, it would help if you give somebody time to transition, to mentally transition, and even to think about more practical ways to find employment and things like that. I mean, that would help, but I don't know how realistic it is.
I have a little bit that I want to add to that, which is that basically, I think when you lay people off, you have to do it with humanity, right? You can take the perspective saying, you're a resource, we don't need you anymore, so here you go. Or you can take it as a perspective saying, we as an organization value you. The circumstances are such that we can't keep you on anymore, but we appreciate what you've done, and we want to do our best to make sure that you succeed elsewhere, right? Which are two very different perspectives that you can look at when you're trying to have that conversation. Too many people are very cut and dried about it, Elon Musk downwards, and I think that's the wrong way to go about it. You can't be insensitive about something which is so deeply impactful to a person.
Absolutely.
So you have to be very sensitive, and you have to not just say this stuff, you have to mean it, and you have to do stuff about it. So how can you help them find other jobs? How can you help them go elsewhere? Does that basically people get laid off because an organization is trying to save money. Maybe instead of saving 60%, maybe you'll save 55%, but spend that 5% on making sure that these people who leave, it's a very simple test saying if a job opens up and your company starts to hire again, will that person reapply? Right?
Course, yeah.
And I think that your goal as not an HR professional, I think the HR professional is just the person who executes. But the top management, they think about it, is that I want every single person who's gotten laid off to try and come back and rejoin my organization because of the way that we part. Right? You do it with that level of sensitivity, with that level of humility and understanding and patience, that people respect you for the way that you ask them to. That's really what you have to be able to pull off. It's not that hard, but I don't think people try, and that's the sad part.
Yeah, and I think at this point we have case studies of different organizations doing it differently. So we've seen the good, bad, ugly. We can benchmark, but as you were speaking, I was also very cognizant of the geographical differences, like how it's perceived in different cultures, right? Like Vandana, you talked about, being shut off and then not being given notice and things like that. And then because I'm in Europe, legislature does not allow us to do that. Like it's not possible. Like a employee knows 3-4 months ahead of time that they're at risk. They go through a consultation process. They have a very generous pact. So there is a very strong support system that the government provides. So it is impossible to say we're giving you a week's notice or a month's notice. Like it's just not happening. And I'm also a little curious, like, do you think as a society and government, we need to step up, because it might be too much to just think that organizations will do that?
I think India as a economic system, as a corporate system, as a in the way that we govern our companies and how we run things is a few decades behind the West. And so I think legislation would be helpful. It would be good. I don't think it's realistic to expect that India will execute stuff like that, even in the next decade. It'll take longer. I think the ownership has to come from the companies at this point in time. I think it has to be the leaders who have to say that, okay, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And layoffs can happen not just because a company is choosing to lay off people. It's because of bad decision making. It's because of the environment. It's because of things which even a CEO cannot control. Right? I mean, if Nokia phone stops selling and Samsung and Apple phone starts selling, Nokia is going to have to lay people off. It's just the reality now. Was it bad decision making? Was it the environment? Was it just that somebody was asleep at the job? We can start figuring out the finger pointing. That's not going to solve it. But it's about how do you handle that? And that's true for anything in life, right? It's the decision that you make. How do you handle this? How do you handle a difficult customer? How do you handle a difficult situation with an employee? It's the same thing. And you can approach it with empathy, you can approach it with sensitivity, or you can approach it like an idiot. And that's a choice that you have to. The point is you have to choose. Too many people don't even think about the choice.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I know that the times are changing, people's relationships with work is changing. Everyone's looking for secondary and tertiary sources of income so that you're no longer hedging on just one bet. I'm going to ask you one last question and then for final words. But there's a question that's come in saying, are we addressing systematic causes of ill health, which is silent hiring, overwork, toxic workplaces, social psychological risks? I'm going to let the psychologist in house answer that question. Do you think work's really all that bad?
Well, you know what? I mean, it's unfortunate if work is becoming all that bad because there is all this work on flow, right? Which is about the joy of work and the joy that and the well-being that comes from being engaged in productive activities, whatever that is, whatever definition you give to work. And sitting in office doing something, or you're out in the fields working on something, right? Whatever work is to you. But work is something that's wonderful. It's something that we all do, right? And it brings a sense of meaning and purpose and self-esteem and so many different things, right? So it's unfortunate if work is becoming something which is primarily stressful and anxiety provoking and doesn't leave you time to take care of the basics of health. I mean, the basic pillars of health are sleep, exercise, nutrition, and of course, relationships. I mean, there's the study on how longevity and happiness, like there's this very long standing Harvard study that's been going on. And they found that, the key to health and happiness and longevity is relationships. It doesn't matter what work you did. It doesn't matter what you earned. It doesn't matter what positions you held, right? What matters is the relationships that you built and experienced through your life. So, I mean, so there is, of course, all of that out there, and it's sad. It's very unfortunate if work is becoming something that's detrimental to health, rather than something that that promotes our well-being. So is there a problem? Yes, I agree with whoever put that note. That is a problem. That's a problem. That's very unfortunate if that's happening, and that is happening.
True. I'm going to wrap us up here. Thank you so much for spending time today. Do you have any last words for those who've been laid off and not been laid off? Chetan, we'll go to you first.
Sure. It's just a small life event and it's not the end of the world. And you have to look at, don't just look at your resume, look at everything beyond your resume and think of it as an opportunity. Rajita talked about the analogy of life and death. Kabir has this doha, which says, sorry, for the Hindi speaking people, he has this doha saying, Bhala hua meri matki phuti re, main paniya bharan se chuti re, right? The doha is actually about death. But it actually applies to a workplace. अगर आपकी मटकी फूट जाती है, which means if you are let go of your responsibilities, and like I said, I got that vacuum, so I got that opportunity to rethink my life. You're in a sense, somebody's handing you that vacuum, and if you can scale down life and minimize your costs and find some time and find a window to really rethink who you are and what you want to be and what will give you joy, grab that. And it's not the end of the world. Check out my TEDx talk. It's titled "Why Getting Laid Off Can Be a Good Thing," and maybe you'll get some ideas. So all the best.
Yeah. I absolutely enjoyed that talk, by the way. I definitely would recommend. Vandita, what would you say?
Well, I think self-compassion is really important, and I would just say be kind to your own self. Don't blame yourself. Don't pile on all this guilt and shame. And I should have taken a different decision, and all of those regrets or whatever it is. Don't pile all that on yourself. And and I think it's very important if you are going through this experience, or people around you are going through, whichever way. I think it's important to just be kinder to one's own self and say, it's okay, it happens. What can I do at this point in time to help myself? So if I need to take a break, if I need to think about things, if I need to put up. If I need to share with people that it's making me uncomfortable and it's not a happy place to be in, then maybe flag it if that's possible to whoever. So in small ways and big ways, just trying to kind of be kinder to oneself and be more of one's own friend. Try to be your own best friend, kind of thing.
Thank you so much. Geeta, I'm going to hand it back to you to get us out of here.
Thank you so much. I think this was a very honest, a very humane conversation. And I think there's a lot for all of us that we've taken away. When one looks at starting from, as organizational leaders, as well as HR, that's what Rajita said. I mean, it was a real candid in terms of what is the reality, the economic necessity versus, but I think what Chetan, you said was so important that it can be done in a better manner. And I think we shouldn't take shortcuts. And thank you so much, Vandita, for bringing in so many. I think this whole thing of keeping the shame parked outside is such a great, takeaway for all of us. It's not ours, it's imposed. And I think that is something which is, which came out so clearly from what you said. And Ankita, you was just so awesome. And thank you so much for anchoring this conversation, make it so real. And I'm going to also thank Rajita in her absence, because she's going to be viewing this YouTube, that what she brought to the table as an HR practitioner is, this whole marrying of the reality versus what ought to be done as well. So look forward to more such conversations. Thank you, audience, for being there, fully engaged. There's so much with chatter that is happening. And please stay connected. We will come out with, there are multiple more series on even office workplace bullying we are going to be talking about. And therefore, stay connected with us. We are coming back every month with more and more conversations. So thank you once again, Chetan, Vandita, and Ankita for joining us. And thank you, audience, for this wonderful session. So we'll close for now.
Thank you, Ankita. It's brilliant.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ankita.
Bye.
It was lovely speaking with you.
Same here. I loved it. Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Doc.